In a couple of days, the new Canadian Prime Minister and the US President will meet for the first time since the start of the trade conflict. But in a brand new interview today, the President has made new comments that many Canadians find offensive, comments that the Prime Minister previously said would be enough to throw a wrench in any negotiations. However, this is something that he has since softened his stance on since his victory in the Canadian election. And just today, Trump gave more details on thoughts of military action to absorb Canada, claiming that the biggest threats to Canada are coming from elsewhere. But what exactly are these threats? Are they real? And how has Canada's Prime Minister responded to all of this? Let's get into it. Since the start of the 51st State Musings of the President, the Canadian government has taken the position that this is a real, serious threat, and Canadians first came to attention when Trudeau, the previous Prime Minister, was caught on a hot mic.
Mr. Trump has it in mind that one of the easiest ways of doing that is absorbing our country. And it is a real thing. In my conversation with him,
the timing of this hot mic was aligned with when Trudeau stepped down, which made way for the new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, to take control of the Liberal Party. Now, some conservative Canadians believe that the hot mic and the following Liberal leadership race were strategic moves in preparation to make way for Mark Carney to win the election for the Liberals. And the new Prime Minister thinks that these threats are just as serious as the previous Prime Minister did. He continued to voice how, in his eyes, these threats are incredibly serious, and this was included in his victory speech from last Monday.
America wants our land, our resources, our water, our country. Never. But these are not idle threats. President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never ever happen.
In line with this point of view, the Canadian Prime Minister previously said that any negotiations with the states would come only after they stop making comments about the absorption of Canada and start showing respect for Canadian sovereignty. However, in his first press conference as Prime Minister, Mark Carney backed down on this stance, announcing that he'd open communications this Tuesday, despite the continued comments from Trump and his administration. Now, this is a key point because just a couple of hours ago, in a brand new interview, Trump reignited similar talks. He continues to outline the chances of using military force to achieve these goals, while explaining how he sees bigger threats to Canada than the US poses. Now, I'll show you this clip in a moment, but first, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, and that's Incogni. You might not know this, but you've definitely seen the negative impacts of it. Despite personal information laws, thousands of companies around the world are collecting and trading your personal data, even if you haven't consented to it. Now, this has happened to me. I've signed up for various newsletters and seen an uptick in the spam calls I'm getting all the time, as well as emails from unrelated senders. The good news? Well, you can request that data brokers delete the information they have about you. Great. But the bad news is it would take ages to do this all manually one by one to each of the thousands of different brokers. That's why I use Incogni. They'll reach out to these data traders on your behalf, saving you countless hours. And you can get 60% off of Incogni's Unlimited and Family Unlimited plans by using the link in the description. I asked Incogni to remove me from these databases and just look at all the places they've found and removed my data from. And this is just in the past month. With everything from our real life that we put out online, I worry about someone I don't know potentially finding my address, my personal phone number, or even information about my family members. But by using Incogni, I have the peace of mind that at least I'm doing everything I can in my power to prevent that from happening. So go to incogni.com/Russell and use the code Russell, that's RUSSELL, to get an exclusive offer of up to 60% off the unlimited plan, or include up to 4 additional family members with the Family Unlimited plan. That's incogni.com/Russell and use code Russell, or click the link below to take your personal data off of the market. Now, in today's Trump interview on NBC's Meet the Press, he takes his comments on Canada even further.
So will you talk to him about making Canada a 51st state, annexing Canada?
I'll always talk about that. You know why? We subsidize Canada to the tune of $200 billion a year. We don't need their cars. In fact, we don't want their cars. We don't need their energy. We don't even want their energy. We have more than they do. We don't want their lumber. We have great lumber. All I have to do is free it up from the environmental lunatics. We don't need anything that they have.
Now, many people question the validity of the trade deficit numbers that Trump is referencing, largely pointing at this being a result of below market value oil that Canada sends to the US for processing. But the broader theme stands. Trump and his administration don't see Canada as a necessary trading partner. To me, this seems like a negotiation tactic, an attempt to reduce the perceived leverage that your negotiation counterpart has in an effort to improve your own position. Now, regardless of whether the US actually doesn't need Canada or not, if you listen to his administration's rationale as of late, they say that the point of tariffs was to bring people to the negotiating table. Now, you can make of that what you will, because it seems that the stated goals of the US, well, they tend to change. Initially, it was my understanding that the point of this, the use of tariffs, was as a way to raise money and to incentivize the reshoring of manufacturing in the US in an effort to bring back middle-class jobs. Though these days, that doesn't seem to be what the administration is talking about, which seems like a substantial shift and makes it hard to be certain of what the end goal here actually even is. There's a lot more going on here, and we're going to continue to cover it, so make sure to subscribe to the channel. We'll be following all of this in detail, and you can subscribe to the email newsletter where I send out all of the sources that I use to make these videos. Now, if you listen to both the former and current Canadian Prime Minister, you'd walk away with the idea that this is all really about taking over Canada's abundant natural resources. Now, that's why Trump was just asked about the chance of using military force to achieve this goal.
You and I talked, and I asked you if you would rule out military force to take Greenland, and you said no, you don't rule out anything. Would you rule out military force to take Canada?
Well, I think we're not going to ever get to that point. It could happen. Something could happen with Greenland. I'll be honest. We need that for national and international security.
But not with
I think
Canada?
It's highly unlikely. I don't see it with Canada. I just don't see it. I have to be honest with you.
Okay, but you don't rule it out for Greenland.
And by the way, Canada, they spend less money on military than practically any nation in the world. They pay NATO less than any nation. They think we're subsidized. They think we are going to protect them. And really, we are. But the truth is, they don't carry their full share, and it's unfair to the United States and our taxpayers.
So he says that he doesn't see this type of military action actually happening here in Canada, though, to be honest, he doesn't really rule this out clearly either. Now, of course, you have to take that with a grain of salt. The president seems to really freewheel it when it comes to these types of unscripted interviews, and often the policies don't match his claims. But more interesting to me than those comments are the comments about protection, where he says Canada assumes that the US will protect them, and with Trump saying in reality, they would protect us, but that it would be out of necessity due to Canada's lack of substantial military as a result of us failing to hit our NATO defense spending targets for a very long time. And this is something that, to a certain extent, the new Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, agrees on, at least in part. Canada is in need of military and security expansion.
Qualified Canadian workers and
will
Canadian
focus
wood.
on keeping Canada secure as a sovereign nation and Canadians safe in their communities. We'll build a stronger Canadian armed forces to protect Canadians, defend our sovereignty, and support our allies. We'll strengthen our border security with 1,000 more CBSA officers, as well as scores of dog teams, drones, and scanners to fight the traffic of guns and drugs.
But many Canadians, I'll note not all, but many, believe that the biggest security threat to Canada comes from the Trump administration and his 51st state comments. So what exactly are these threats that Canada is facing, if not the US, that Trump is saying America will protect us from? Well, traditional media in Canada hasn't talked about threats to Canada outside of the context of the US, but in order to try to make sense of what the US administration is saying, whether you think that's a pointless exercise or not, I looked for comments related to these non-US threats to Canada. Now, here's a former chief strategist for Trump who talks about his perception that the north of Canada will be extremely geopolitically crucial in the coming decades.
Number two, and I think more importantly, to avoid in the Arctic, the new great game, right? The new power struggle of the great game of the 21st century, they should be very concerned vis-a-vis Russia and the Chinese Communist Party that they're not the next Ukraine. They are going to have a territorial, I think, movement by the Chinese Communist Party, at least, into their northern territories in the Arctic. Right now, they're in a dominion status or aligned with the English-speaking countries of the British Empire. There's no money there to defend anybody. Britain can't defend itself. And so they're going to have to make a decision over the next couple of years.
So he claims that Russia and China may make moves to claim territory in Canada's vast north. The idea being that if world temperatures continue to rise, and as we develop new technologies, well, these waterways could hold more military importance as well as trade importance as potential shipping routes open up. Now, if Russia or China seriously made moves here, it's not an oversimplification to say that Canada would have an incredibly hard time defending itself. So perhaps Carney's comments on military spending could address these concerns that he acknowledges right here in his election platform that he put out just a couple of weeks ago. He says these threats and concerns are real. He says that he will add a whole new fleet of submarines and heavy icebreakers to monitor and secure Canada's Arctic, while saying we're going to get a new fleet of underwater and aerial drones in order to protect against threats in the Arctic. But would Canadians be really open to the vast spending increase it would take to develop our own military to the point where we could adequately defend these regions by ourselves? It would take significantly more than the 2% GDP NATO targets that we've already failed to hit, especially if we want to be able to defend these regions independently. Otherwise, Canada will need to lean on some other geopolitical superpower to help us. Maybe that's the US, or maybe Canada's new government wants to turn to some other global power to partner on a security basis. Do Canadians see the US or China or Russia as a bigger threat to their way of life and their national and economic security? I'm curious what you think. Or perhaps these concerns of Russia and China in the north are overblown and are being used as a way to increase the perceived fear of non-American threats in an attempt to tie Canada more closely to our neighbors to the south. But if this is the case, then why did the new Prime Minister mention these threats right in his platform? There's certainly reason to believe that other nations are seeking to influence Canada for their own interests. This report was created by a multi-partisan, top-level security clearance committee of Canadian members of Parliament in the wake of some serious interference allegations that have come to light over the past few years. In this section of the report, they outline who the key threat actors are for these kinds of interference, and they say it's in line with what they assessed in 2019, that the largest actors were China and Russia, albeit with more emphasis on China. They also say that states like India, redacted, Pakistan, and Iran also engage in foreign interference activities. Now, you might not have heard a lot of this in the news, both south of the border and in Canada, and this part of the report might be a reason why. They say that according to Canadian intelligence communities, China was the most capable actor in this context, but all people interfering in the country are doing so in direct connection with media content via engagement with Canadian media executives and journalists. It outlines how the PRC has paid to publish media articles without attribution, have sponsored media travel to China, and have pressured journalists to withdraw articles, again creating false accounts on social media to spread disinformation. Again, all of this is according to this NSICOP report, a multi-partisan committee of Canadian parliamentarians. And it's interesting to see that the US doesn't show up in this report as a key threat actor. If the report were done today, though, maybe they would be. Would America make the list? This was done before the start of the new Trump administration, so who knows? We'll have to wait for their next report to find out. Obviously, there's a lot going on here, and I'm curious what you think about it. What do you think will come of this meeting between Trump and the new Canadian Prime Minister on Tuesday? And what do you think of these comments on national security? Where do you think the biggest threat to Canada actually comes from? Let me know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And if you want the sources for this video, you can get them by signing up for the email newsletter that goes out after every video, sharing the sources that are used in these videos. But with all of that said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.